this is William Fraser, who's a character who dominates the exhibition that we put together upstairs for you. Now, here is what Fraser looks like, age 16, on his way out to India. Scottish aristocrat with a rather kind of snotty sneer in his gaze, like some sort of young Darcy figure escaped from a Jane Austen novel. He is all set to go and take over his job as resident in Delhi, and he's shipped from Inverness by ship to the Scottish capital, Edinburgh, where Raeburn, the preeminent portrait painter of the time, paints his picture. He then paints successively 4 of his younger brothers as they all go out to India. Only one returns home alive. But this is what happens. So here he is on his way out to India. On arrival in Calcutta, he's already beginning to develop some Hindustani moustaches and some rather sort of raffish sideburns. But he's still got his Scottish hat on, but from the neck down, it's all Indian. We've got the full jama, and he's got his Persian calligraphy utensils in his hand. But look what happens when he arrives in Delhi. Things are going even more wild. Here he is with this rather natty sort of designer jacket. Nehru never had anything quite as... it's the ultimate Nehru jacket with this lovely hookah and this fantastic beard. Here he is. This also is upstairs a few years later. And by the time he dies in 1835, his moustaches have really gone into a remarkable topiary. This does not delight some of his superiors. The wife of the British Commander-in-Chief, Lady Nugent, turns up in Delhi in about 1810 and is completely horrified by what she sees. Ochterlony, Gardner, and Fraser, the 3 British diplomats meant to be flying the flag in the Mughal capital, have all succumbed. I shall now say a few words about Messrs. Gardner and Fraser, who are both still of our party, writes Lady Nugent in her diary. They both wear enormous whiskers, and neither will eat pork or beef, being as much Hindus as Christians, if not more so. They are both of them clever and intelligent, but eccentric. And having come to this country early, they have formed opinions and prejudices that make them almost natives. In our conversations together, I endeavour to insinuate everything that I think will have any weight with them. I talk of the religion with which they were brought up, and of their friends who will be astonished and shocked at their whiskers and beards, etc., etc. Yet all this we generally debate between us, and I hope they will think of it. Now, it's quite clear that Fraser didn't think anything more of this whatsoever. He totally ignores Lady Nugent for the very good reasons that he's having a lovely time. So you have the same group of artists working for completely different patrons, and unless you actually know who's commissioned the painting, it's very difficult to know whether to label it late Mughal or company. These terms simply are retrospective labels added by historians later that fail to capture the extreme porousness and strangely unclassifiable quality of the art and society of this period. And I think it is this very unclassifiable nature of this period that has left it so neglected. In an age when every quirk of the art historical landscape has been mapped out in a gridiron of PhDs, this entire phase of painting has been almost entirely neglected. And it's very, very fine. And there's very, very fine work there. And it's this extraordinary sensation that Utica and I had when we were working on this exhibition is, why is this the first exhibition of its sort? Why is this material, not a single one of these paintings, for example, is contained in any national collection in India? There is no Ghulam Ali Khan or Mazhar Ali Khan in a national collection anywhere in India. This material has been extraordinarily neglected, and this show that you will see this evening upstairs is the very first of its kind to collect this material together and to, in a sense, make the case for this being regarded as something really quite extraordinary and very, very interesting, particularly in a period of history when so often we are told that Hindu, Muslim, and Christian are incompatible with each other, that there are riots in India, that Islam is a force against which the West is sizing up, first in Iraq and Afghanistan, now perhaps in Iran. This period, to me, shows how these different worlds can come together and how both in art and in literature and in society, these different groups can intermingle and learn from each other and produce something extraordinary. And this final Renaissance ends in this miserable moment. Zafar, the poet, the artist, the calligrapher, in his youth a fine archer and a horseman, has surrendered, lives to see all his children hung and hunted down, and is driven into a dementia of depression, and is sentenced by a show trial to deportation to Burma. And the last of the great Mughals dies in exile in Rangoon 10 years after this. It's been a far cry from the world of the white Mughals that began this period, but it's taken only 60 years for this transition. And Delhi is left a ruin. The night before he's deported, same day that this photograph is taken in the Red Fort prison, Zafar is visited by the war correspondent, the first war correspondent, William Howard Russell. And Russell is admitted into his prison and finds Zafar, who has been deprived of his pen and paper, still writing poetry, but now with a burnt stick on the walls of his cell. And no one knows what those words were that he was writing, but by the early 1860s, minstrels were going around the bazaar towns of Delhi, of North India, singing what they purported to be the great last ghazals of Zafar. And some of the couplets went something like this. Delhi was once a paradise where love held sway and reigned, but its charms lie ravished now, and only ruins remain. No tears were shed when shroudless they were laid in common graves. No prayers were read for the noble dead. Unmarked remain their graves. Yet it was not enough to die and lose one's precious head. The people live in terror still and walk about in dread. But things cannot remain, O Zafar, thus, for who can tell? Through God's great mercy and the prophet, all may yet be well. Thank you very much.